The main difference between these two is that March 1st movement was completely peaceful. The March 1st movement also influenced many other movements around the world, such as India's Satyagraha, led by Mahatma Gandhi, which indirectly influenced Martin Luther King and his civil rights movement. Cairo, Egypt's students' protests, and many more in Latin America and the Middle East.
So let's go back to when it started. It started all in 1905 when Japan was able to make Korea protectorate. So that's when it kind of started. In 1907, Japan abdicated. Is that how you pronounce it? Abdicated the emperor in favor of his weaker son, Sunjong, to take more control over Korea. And in 1910,
They
annexed treaty,
which made Korea part of Japan's borders.
And then in 1919 was the first movement. It was a peaceful movement, and nothing really bad happened.
It was the March 1st movement, and 2 million people took to the streets, and to put this into consideration, Korea's current population at this time was 4 million people. So, that is nearly half of everyone peacefully protesting Japan's rule.
And then 1929, they took again in the streets, and this time it was not so good. Japan soldiers started firing and killing many other protesters. 7,000 were killed, 1,600 were injured, and many were jailed without trial or wrongfully jailed.
These people, the people jailed were later tortured. So, Japan's role was very treacherous. They forced them to work. Korea's farmers, they had to meet a quota. But to meet this quota, they had to pay for Japan. They had to pay for Japan's fertilizers and pesticides. So they were getting cheated out of their money and their crops.
And then in the 1930s, they grew heavy industries to make machines, metal, instead of just crops for Japan, so they could have more weapons and just all around useful items. And then in 1938, Koreans were allowed into the Japanese military, and this made a big difference, so more of them could have more important roles in their community.
But why would Japan do this in the first place? In the turn of the 20th century, Japan wanted to expand. They were looking for war. So they needed resources because they're a small island country off the coast of Asia. So they turned to Korea, a fairly small country, rich with resources, but with a small military. So they directly in conflict and took over.
Yeah, and then in
well, there were many movements that happened, and not all of them were peaceful. In 1907, the same year that Japan abdicated the current emperor in favor of his son, the Korean army was disbanded altogether. So they made the Righteous Army, a small group of guerrilla warfare fighters that were a thorn in Japan's side. And the March 1st movement, one of the biggest movements that happened, started in 1919. 2 million people took to the streets, and it started off with just 33 leaders signing a proclamation of independence, very much like the Declaration of Independence, signed by founding fathers of the U.S., and they signed this in Pagoda Park, and that's exactly where the first protest started.
You guys are obviously very knowledgeable, and I like that you're giving me all of this information, but is it okay if we ask you some questions also?
Yes.
Okay, here's a cool seat. So, what did you find were the most useful primary sources to help you understand your topic?
There was a book which we found that took many points of view from Koreans, and it delved into a Korean family during rule, and one of the more memorable moments was when they had to choose Japanese names, because Japan forced on all Koreans to change their names.
I think another really good primary source was mainly documentaries and websites based around this topic in World War II era, between World War I and World War II. We found those the most useful because it gives more about that than comparing it to now, other websites.
And how did you go about designing your website?
So we took a look at the rulebook, and on the homepage we needed a set template. So we made that set template look nice, and then we needed to build it around that. We had normal ideas, paragraphs, thesis statement, and the backgrounds we just changed to either traditional Korean architecture or just for color or just something associated with the topic we were talking about in that area of the website.
And how did you, what's the menu on your website? If you were to look at the different topics that you chose right now on your website, what are they? Just remind me, I looked at it.
We have a few. We have March 1st movement itself, our main topic. We have Japanese rule.
Thesis statement, introduction, the stuff more about the March 1st movement, and
We have more Korean movements, and
process paper, and annotated bibliography. We updated our bibliography, which is on this paper if you guys want to. Sure.
because original was incorrect. And so there was, additionally, we also have World War II, where where Japanese rule over Korea was stopped at the end of World War II. And in the Korean movements section, we have something talking about a Korean volunteer army made by the Korean government that fought under the Chinese Communist flag. And that later became the nucleus or center of the North Korea's army. That's why they're still looking like Soviet and Communist Party military.
And the images on your website, how did you guys sort of pick the ones you wanted to choose, and what do you think is the best fit to pick the one you like the most?
We chose by doing something that shows how it was and how cruel how it actually was, how cruel Japan was to them, and how bad Korea was at the time, and how everyone was being used, a bunch of slaves.
Well, one of my favorite ones was where Japan, it shows Japanese troops marching outside Seoul, which was the capital of Korea. They show Japanese troops marching outside its west gate. It just shows how much Japanese army was there, constantly there watching.
No. So what do you think is the most important consequence from the March 1st movement, the biggest lasting impact?
Just the sheer amount of other movements that have been influenced by it. The Satyagraha by Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King's civil rights movement,
The students from
Yes, for the Philippines, students in the Philippines, for May 4th movement for China. There was a little bit of a February Revolution in Soviet Union, and there was more minorities such as for Cairo students, and just all around the world, the list just goes on.
Is there anything else that you want to tell us that we didn't ask about, that you want us to know?
Just the sheer brutality of Japan's
Yeah.
rule.
the, the Koreans had little to no rights and just abused overall.
They were used. Even when they were allowed into the military, they were mostly used as cannon fodder. They were mistreated. They were thought of as actually cowardly. So I don't think there was any surprise when Korean resistance rose up.